spiritual progress, if you want to mark your spiritual progress, it's where you want less and less honor for yourself. You want less and less people to appreciate you. You want Jesus Christ to be glorified. And that's what John the Baptist said. He must increase and I must decrease. That's a mark of a man of God. Dear brothers, if that's your goal in life, you may say, Brother Zac, it's easy for you to say that. You're so well known and all that, and you can say. But it's not that. I think I said that many, many years ago when I was completely unknown. I said, Lord, I don't want to be known. I just want God to be glorified. I said that when I was 23 years old. I said, Lord, I want you to be glorified. That's all in my life. I don't want any honor in my life at all. But one of the things the Lord showed me from the early days was, for God to be glorified, we have to become small. When I'm weak, then I'm strong. See this verse in 2 Corinthians in chapter 12. This is the greatest apostle that lived at that time. I believe Paul was the greatest apostle in the first century. And he says in 2 Corinthians 12:10 about himself, I am well content with what? Weakness, insult, distress, persecutions, difficulties. Now, that's not normal for a human being to say, I'm content with being weak and insulted. Because he says, I've learned a secret. It's only when I am weak that I'm really strong. When I am weak, then I am strong. Please remember this little phrase at the end of verse 10. It'll be a great help to you throughout your life. There's a little expression at the end of verse 10. When I am weak, then I am strong. I'll tell you from my own testimony. Many, many times when I've got up to speak and I don't know what to say, I'm really weak. I've found some amazing words have come through me. I say, Lord, I want to be weak because that'll make me lean upon you. And from my early days, the Lord showed that to me in different ways. When I was about 23 years old and I began to serve the Lord and I was preaching in big crowds, even at that age, I started losing my hair. You know how young people are. We all like to have good hair, especially to impress the girls and comb our hair and have plenty of hair. And here I had lost most of my hair. And one advantage was that people thought when I was 23, people thought I was 35 or 40 or something, and they'd listen to me. So I was happy. They don't think there's some young kid getting up to speak. But I thought also, well, nobody will ever marry me for my hair now. Somebody will marry me only if they love Jesus and they see this man loves Jesus. I want to be married to someone who loves Jesus. And that's what my wife really did. She didn't marry for my hair, that's obvious. When I'm weak, that's just a small example. But when I studied about the Apostle Paul, I discovered that he, as a man, he was 4 feet 11 inches tall. That was his height. I've never seen a man of that height. There's nobody here of that height. He was shorter than every single man here. 4 feet 11 inches. It's pretty shameful for a man to be 4 feet 11. On top of that, he was bald, more than me, completely bald. I mean, history has recorded, there are other people who lived in Paul's time who recorded in history what Paul looked like. He was bald, he was 4 feet 11 inches, and he had a hooked nose. And on top of that, he had eyes that were infected. I think some type of infection that would make pus come out. And I'll tell you one place where you get an idea of that is turn to Galatians in chapter 4. In Galatians chapter 4, I don't have time to show you this, but if you read in Acts of the Apostles, Paul had no intention. Galatia was not a town, it was an area with a number of towns. And Paul did not want to go there. He was passing through there to go somewhere else. And you read in Acts 16 that God made Paul sick. So he had to stop there. He couldn't travel. It was such a bad sickness that he could not travel. And he says here in Galatians chapter 4, you know, verse 13, 4:13, that it was because of my bodily illness that I got stuck with you and I preached the gospel. And all those churches in Galatia came up because Paul was sick. If he was not sick, there'd have been no churches in Galatia. He'd have gone on. And then what was the sickness? He says, my bodily condition was a trial to you. Now, if I've got fever, that's not a trial to you. Or if I have some physical weakness, a stomach ache or a headache, that's not a trial to you. But he says, there was something in me that you despised or loathed, verse 14, something about my bodily condition that it could have made you loathe me. Loathe is a very strong word. Oh, look in disgust. I thought about it. What is it that Paul get up to preach and you don't feel like looking at him? I'll tell you. I think his eyes were infected and maybe some pus was coming out frequently, and they didn't have antibiotics those days. And he says, yet, verse 14, you received me as an angel of God. And not only that, verse 15, last part, you were ready to pluck out your eyes and give them to me. That's how I know he had problem with his eyes. So imagine a man, already he's 4 feet 11, bald with a hooked nose. And on top of that, he has this infection that make people loathe him. Loathe is a very strong word. Why did God make his greatest apostle like that? Instead of handsome, tall, smart, with nice hair combed like some film star. No. He wouldn't have been weak then. He wouldn't have depended on God. He would have depended on his personality. I'm like a film star. People will listen to me. One of the greatest men of God whom I respected in India was a man who could not speak. He stuttered throughout his life. He was the greatest apostle I knew in India. He couldn't depend on his words. He had to depend on the Holy Spirit. Paul had to depend on the Holy Spirit. So it's when we are weak that God makes us depend on him. And we are such creatures that like to draw attention to ourselves and get honor. I'll tell you something, if God really loves you and has his best for you, he'll make you weak in one way or the other. It could be financially. I remember in the early years, first 3-4 years of our married life, one way God humbled me and my wife was by extreme financial difficulty. We never begged, we never borrowed, but we lived with great simplicity. And when somebody gave me a gift of a couple of shirts, we could never afford to buy shirts for ourselves. I had to wear my old naval shirts for years and years. And somebody gave me a couple of shirts. I would preserve them for whenever I had to go somewhere to preach, because they're the only 2 good shirts I had. And somebody said, Brother Zac, we only see you wearing 2 shirts. They didn't know they were the only 2 good shirts I had. I wouldn't let anybody know about my limitation. Not a single soul knew how we struggled, but God tested me in those years to see what'll he do? Will he go and tell people his need, or will he tell me everything? Is he willing to accept that humiliation? And my wife was willing to accept it. I've seen through my life, and I want to say that God does his work through weak people. So if God has made you weak in some way, not appreciated or respected by others, say, when I'm weak, I'll be strong. God bless you.